What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Turn Bark Time. I'm the Turn.
I'm the Bark.
And we're going to be here a long time. Welcome, Season 2, Episode 7. Today, we are actually going to answer... so one of the things I like to do on my Instagram account and my Facebook account is when we publish an episode, I always like to ask people what they're doing. For Tyler Tallquist, if you're watching this, I'm not doing the history of what you wanted me to do the history of. For David Weaver, that's the history that was in World of Warcraft. I'm not going to do that research. I'm sorry, buddy. But for Mrs. Harrington, Bobby Harrington throughout the Roanoke Colony and the Lost Colony of Roanoke, and that is what we are doing today. So go ahead, Bark. Let's start it off. Roanoke Colony.
So Roanoke Colony would be in present-day North Carolina, and by in I mean off the shore. It's in a group of islands. Hold on, known as the Outer Bank. So Turner's got a historical map there that's drawn, and you can see the island of Roanoke. On my map, the 5-pointed star is Roanoke, and then the 4-pointed star is the island of Crotone, or today it's called Hatteras. I actually watched some videos on exploring North Carolina to figure out how to pronounce things down south, because it didn't. I was like, there's no way this looks like. I'm gonna screw it up, because like there's a town on Roanoke Island today, and I was like, it looks like Manteo is like, because like we worked in Quincy for so long, but they pronounce it Manteo.
Okay.
And I'm like, well, there you go. You never know. So anyway, it goes back to the age of exploration, right? The Spaniards are in the south. They find the Caribbean. Britain lands up in like Newfoundland, and the Queen of England gives a charter that says, as long as you're below Newfoundland and above Spanish Florida, it's yours. And she gives it to some guy, I think it's Humphrey Gilbert.
Yep.
But Gilbert dies, and they split it between his son, whose name is something Gilbert that I can't recall. I apologize. And his half-brother, a guy named Walter Raleigh, who becomes famous at some point, right?
Yeah.
And so they begin exploring the Americas, and this is before the Virginia colony, right? This is the Virginia Company, right, that establishes Jamestown. And so it's really interesting because they're coming over, and the first couple times they just kind of sail around, and they're like, okay, I think we found stuff. And they literally thought that like the Albemarle sound, which is the sound that's right up there. You can't hear it, but you can see it. Weird how sound is that way. They thought that was the Pacific Ocean initially. And they're like, the Northwest Passage, by golly, we've found it. Good job, boys. And then they did some more research, and they're like, maybe not so much. So we're here to talk about the first time they kind of came and they did these exploratory, and the way they sailed there was like they sailed from like England to the Caribbean and then sailed north from the Caribbean. So like they don't, I guess it's good in a sense that you have a frame of reference of like how far away from the Spaniards you are.
Yeah.
Because they'd map some stuff down there, so you can kind of start piecing things together. But like the first couple times they go out and they just kind of map stuff. They build a fort on Roanoke, and it's kind of more of a military scientific, like what resources are here that we can take advantage of. And they end up getting into a bit of a squabble with the natives. Like that's never happened before. And they have to pull a skedaddle. And then it's after that, right, they kind of decide we're gonna start this colony. We're gonna send, instead of just sending men, they're like, we're gonna send men, women, and children, families. Like, and again, if you have done any amount of research, like like one of the things with Lewis and Clark, the fact that they travel with Sacagawea, Sacagawea, whatever. Sorry, I love that joke. But the fact that they travel with a woman like tells the natives that they're not aggressive. And when the Spaniards were expanding and exploring in what today is Mexico and the southwestern U.S., the fact that they had the the Virgin Mary was a prominent image that they showed, and they're showing an image of a woman, was a kind of a cross-cultural symbol that, like, most people don't put up a picture of a woman and go to war. You know what I mean? That's just not the way that war is conducted across cultures. And so, you know, they set up this colony, you know, and they're trying to figure out what are they going to do. And they were supposed to actually go further inland, I think, to the city of Raleigh.
Yep.
But they kind of get bamboozled. And the pilot of the boat lands them at Roanoke, and it's just kind of like, no, I think you should get off here. And like, disembarks them all and is like, peace, we're out.
Yep. So they take off, and so these people are trying to like discover the island, and they're like going through, and we learn a little bit more about them, just based on some documentation before we have like a secondary mission. But they have problems with the natives, like Barker said, like right off the bat. Creates a huge kind of issue, obviously, because you just got dropped off really far from home, and you're surrounded by people who don't like you. And so they kind of go through their establishment and everything like that. And but what's cool is you have the first, like, since they did bring women and children and stuff like that, you have your first person being born in the New World for English records. And so you have on August 18th in 1587, Eleanor Dare gives birth to a woman or a baby that will be named Virginia, and for the first Christian to be born in Virginia. And again, Virginia is named after the Virgin Queen, which I think is that Elizabeth I? Yeah, okay.
Correct.
Elizabeth the First. So, but again, they, you know, kind of go on, and there's nothing really known about it. But what's crazy is that the guy kind of in charge of the whole boat and everything like that, his name is White, and he basically is like, okay, after everything kind of goes wrong, he decides that he's going to return to England, and he's going to get more supplies and everything like that. Well, the problem is that Spain and England are about to go to war over this area, and just because they don't like each other and everything like that. And so the Queen of Elizabeth actually says nobody can leave England, so that all the ships that are getting ready can get ready for battle and can fight. And so they get kind of permission that during the winter they can actually leave and go to the Caribbean to fight the Spanish. And White's allowed to actually go with his resupply ship. Like, he can say, hey, like, we got people over there, like, we need to get them stuff. And so he gets permission to do. The problem is that when they get ready to launch in March of 1588, unfavorable winds actually keep them in port, so they can't leave. And then he gets new orders that he has to stay and defend England. And so they're like, well, crap. So
there's this little thing called the Spanish Armada coming.
Yes, it's so when we think of, if you, again, studying like the Age of Exploration and things like that, Spain has one of the biggest advantages when they find the New World, because they end up looting and robbing the land and the people of their riches, bring it back to the Spanish treasury, which then they use to build up their navy to then be able to defend the Spanish galleons coming back loaded to the brim with gold and silver and everything else. And they have to defend them from pirates and things like that. So finally, White is kind of allowed to leave, and he gets to set sail on April 22nd, 1588. But they attempt to capture some Spanish ships. And then on May 6th, they're attacked by French pirates near Morocco. Because again, you wouldn't sail straight from England over to the Americas. Like, it just wasn't. You had to sail down to Africa, because Africa sticks out a little bit further, and so you could get fresh water. You'd go to the Canary Islands off the coast and get water and supplies for that long push across the ocean.
I think there's favorable winds as well.
Yeah. And so anyway, following the defeat, they finally the Spanish Armada does attack, and so White actually doesn't get to leave to resupply until 1590.
So he's been gone for 3 years, right? So like you always hear like, my dad left to get a pack of cigarettes and has been gone for 15 years. That's a Simpsons joke. Right, the idea was it would take you roughly 2 months-ish, maybe a little bit over 2 months to sail back and forth. And that doesn't include like all the time to resupply. They're not going to pull up to England and go to ye old Costco.
Exactly.
And just buy stuff. It takes time to get it organized and organize the money and things of that nature. On one of the, the second trip where they set up the fort, they actually pay off. They actually make money even though they lost everything on Roanoke because they looted on they were privateers on the way back. Yeah. What Spain can't protect.
Exactly. And that will actually lead to another thing that's kind of an in-between time, because again, he's been gone for 3 years, but guess who's still there? And that's Spain. And Spain's actually doing reconnaissance on Roanoke and trying to figure out, okay, what are we dealing with here? Is this a large military establishment with like a deep water port so that their navy and the military can set up here? Is this just a settlement that we can easily go in and wipe out or claim for our own and just bring these people with us? What are we dealing with here? And that actually happens. It happens from 1585 to 1590. And there's multiple people that are trying to find different things. Well, they're doing this because when they left Roanoke in 1585, the first time, they actually capture a Spanish galleon that has money on board. And so they're wondering what's going on. Is this a place where English pirates are going to hide and capture Spanish ships as they go back across the sea? So when they go through and they look for this, they don't find very many things. But then in 1587, after they have a failed reconnaissance mission the first time, he sends them to King Philip of Spain, sends him to Chesapeake Bay to look for him. He doesn't find anything at the Chesapeake Bay. Again, Chesapeake Bay really won't be a big thing until 1607 when the Virginia Company sets up the Jamestown colony. But on his way back, he discovers the Port Fernando along the Outer Banks. And it looks to be abandoned with no signs of activity on Roanoke Island. And this is, again, 1587. He leaves without conducting an investigation. And his name's Gonzalez. His name's Vicente Gonzalez. And he doesn't conduct an investigation. He just looks and says, okay, this looks abandoned. They believe that he had found the secret English base. But, however, the Spanish Armada gets defeated by England at this point, and Philip is unable to order an attack. And so, again, they make a plan in 1590 to destroy the Roanoke colony and set up a Spanish colony in the Chesapeake Bay. But it was actually disinformation to try and get the English away from other settlements. So it was a plan that was reportedly made. I apologize, I said that backwards. So it was a plan that was reportedly made to set up and destroy it in 1590. However, it was just disinformation that was trying to get the English to focus on other things.
And so this is John White. He's actually Virginia Dare's grandpa. So he's the father of Virginia Dare's mother, Eleanor. He drops him off. They come back. He finally, through all of his misadventures, comes back. This is actually a watercolor that he made on in the 85 expedition. He went and documented the habits of the Secatan tribe, which was kind of the inland tribe, if I can remember this right. Yeah, they were kind of over on by the Chewan River, so a little bit to the north of where they were. There were natives, the Roanoke, that were on the island with them, and then there's also the Croatan who were down on Croton, which is further down. If you're approaching from the south, you're going to reach them first before you reach Roanoke and all that. But anyway, he gets back and they pull up, and this is where, we often don't talk about everything we've talked about before you get to the Lost Colony of Roanoke. They're like, oh yeah, they drop people off. And then John White goes to get some milk, comes back, and everybody like poof, they're gone. They fail to mention that it was like a 3-year interlude. And so when they show up, they find a tree. So they anchor off Croatoan. They don't actually go inland and talk to the natives. And people are like, well, maybe they should have. They might have learned something. They sail up. They get off the shore of Roanoke. They see smoke one day, and they're like, oh, we think people are there. They get off. They see signs that people have been there recently. They think, and then they see that somebody on a tree on the shore is carved in the letters CRO.
And there's two different kind of scenarios here. So there's that that's on a tree, but then there's also it's been said, if you kind of look behind, Barker has a better picture than I do, but it was also thought to have been carved into the stockade, like the fort. So
yeah, and well, like the CRO was on a tree, and then Croatoan was on the palisade.
Yeah,
and so they postulated that the people left voluntarily and were not under duress because they had said if things were going poorly, they were supposed to have carved like almost like, there's a name for it, but to me it's like the Crusader cross, like the cross that like tapers to the center.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
They were going to carve that if they were leaving under duress, and they didn't. And if you look at it, they get inside the palisade, which is essentially just you drive a bunch of logs into the ground and make a very crude wall, and then you pack dirt behind it so you can stand up and shoot people if they try and come at you.
Yeah.
Right? Very basic fortification. But the homes inside, the verbiage is interesting here because they say the homes were dismantled. Right? They don't say destroyed. Yeah. It was almost as if they had been taken apart. And John White had left and buried really big chests of like his property, and those trunks had been dug up, emptied, they've been looted. But again, this is where we start getting into like they're like, where did all the people go? And you're talking about between 110 and 120 people, men, women, and children that were left. And the homes have been dismantled, the trunks have been looted. There's no sign of the boats that they had, and I think there's skeletal remains of like one person like inside the walls, but like there's no mass graves, there's no major signs of like everybody dying in the settlement. And they do try and sail the 50 miles back to Croatoan, but they pop a anchor cable and they only have one, and they're like, well, again, there's no auto zone or boat zone, I don't know. Boat zone.
Chip zone.
It's the only way to go. No, I don't know. But so they're kind of like, we can't screw this up. Like, we need to go back to England. And White's like, well, my granddaughter should be turning 3. They actually land on what would have been his granddaughter's 3rd birthday. Maybe it was her 3rd birthday. We don't know. We don't know what happened to her. They compromise, try and get to the Caribbean. They get blown off course, end up in the Azores, which sounds like somebody going, oh, yeah, we're going to go to the Caribbean. Joink, left turn. Hi, Azores, which if you don't know, off the coast of Portugal, which is in Europe on the other side of the Atlantic. But nobody really gets back in any kind of like timely fashion to come back and like look for them. Walter Raleigh tries to come back a couple times and says he's going to look for the people of Roanoke. And they're like, no, he really wasn't. He said he was. And like, there's kind of some like politicking, because if he says that they're gone and they're all dead, it's harder for him to hold on to his charter, because part of his charter said he had to have a colony in the New World or on North America. And so he's really slow to be like, yeah, they're gone. He's like, maybe. And then he says, I'm going to go look for them. And then he ends up trying to like cruise around and look for like El Dorado, And then the second time he comes back, he's like, I'm looking for them. And then he sails further south and gathers sassafras and never goes far enough north to actually find Roanoke or Croatoan. And so, it's kind of crazy, because you would think that, like, I guess it's 120 people. And in the grand scheme of things, That's like, an eyelash to the queen. Who cares? It's not worth the money. And so this is where we kind of end up in this, like, this is like one of the greatest historical mysteries, because historians don't know the answer, right? I always tell my kids that history is a puzzle. Well, this is a puzzle that, like, the dog came and ate 3/4 of the box and then barfed on the remaining, pieces. And so we really don't know what we have.
Yeah. And it's actually been, it doesn't really, so John Smith, this is the one I found the most interesting, is John Smith actually, when he comes to Jamestown in 1607, and, he's captured by the Powhatan and meets, other people related to him. So, like, they're his brothers and stuff like that, and their leader. And they describe this place where men wear European-style clothing. And so he said, I'm going to say this wrong, but it's Okana Honan, where men wear the European-style clothing. And then Anowan, which featured walled houses. So Smith is kind of like, okay, that's weird. Like, it could be that colony. And so he starts to go and kind of look for it. But nothing ever really comes up of it. And especially when the natives and the Jamestown settlers stop getting along, and S hits the fan, then it really becomes there's no attempt to try and go look for these people. They're worried about other things, but that's the major attempt. Everyone else kind of looks, and there's other investigations, but there was a site preservation under James Monroe, and the National Park Service began administrating the area in 1941. And in 1950, they tried to make basically the same fort. But there's been archaeological digs. Historians are still trying to figure this out. They are not giving up on this opportunity. And my favorite explanation for all of this, which is not logical, and I'm going to say this because I'm saying it sarcastically, I just want to make that clear to everybody, is the guy who goes, aliens. It's not aliens, but there is a common theory that is actually accepted by most historians, and that is, again, if you had 120, let's call it 120 people. If you had 120 people, and you walk to the next Native American tribe, the ones that don't hate you, and are they going to take on 120 people into their village? Probably not, right? It'd be the same thing as, like, showing up and, to a show. It's like someone shows up to your family Thanksgiving and they're like, hey, we brought 120 people. You're like, I can take like 5, like 10, maybe. I can't take 120. So there is some theories that that groups actually did split up a little bit and go to these different places to try and figure out, a way to survive. Especially since, again, you're talking, they were probably planning on about a year to a year and a half before being resupplied, maybe 2. And now we've hit the 3 mark. If you're living there on your own, a little island, you're kind of like, is anybody coming? No, probably nobody's coming. I don't know what we're going to do. So, yeah,
David Beers Quinn, who's an Irish historian from earlier in the 19th century or 20th century, right? He did a lot of research starting with the Gilbert expeditions, even before Raleigh was involved, and then started looking at it, and he goes, the likely explanation is that they moved from Roanoke into the Chesapeake, like actually onto like North America, like the continent proper. And there's some evidence, there's a map that's been recovered that had patches on it, and they used a light table to look what was underneath the patches. And there was, there used to be it was a native village that was in that area, according to what the best they can kind of surmise, because these maps aren't perfect, and they're not, they're hand drawn from your best estimation, kind of dry, like sailing around stuff. And they think that the patches were there as misinformation. So if they got intercepted on the way back to England from the New World, that nobody would know where the bases and stuff were, or these native villages were. And so they think that they likely, his theory is that they moved in there, they were living there with, like, alongside Native Americans, and then the Powhatans, right, like the tribe that Pocahontas belongs to, right, that dealt with the Jamestown people, like the Roanoke natives and stuff always talked about that there was a much more powerful tribe to the north, and that would be the Powhatans. And so they eventually come down. He blames it on, there was another expedition that came through and like kidnapped members of their tribe. And so, like, in the same way that the colonists didn't discriminate like one tribe of natives from the other, neither did the Powhatan with like, you're European, they're European, you're all in, bed together, you're all the same people.
Yeah,
and so he says maybe they came and attacked them there.
Yeah.
Was his theory for a long time, and either wiped them out in a location not on the island of Roanoke, or that after the attack they dispersed and started, like you said, being absorbed by the different tribes. So there's a tribe. So the island of Croton, actually the inlet in between it and the island next door eventually dries up, like as sea levels change, and it becomes Hatteras Island. And so the tribe that's on there later in history is called the Hatteras tribe, even though people are like, they're most likely the same people as the Crotan, right, that were there originally.
Yeah.
And there's evidence of them talking with other English explorers and saying, well, we've had white ancestors and ancestors with gray eyes, which probably means some sort of like light blue or actually gray, iris color. So, I mean, that the accepted idea is that many of these settlers in small groups, probably at some point, just because, again, you cannot realistically take on that many new people, went out and adopted the Algonquin like lifestyle and just were absorbed culturally. And if you've read, trying to think of what the book would be, I think it's Slavery in Indian Country, I think was the name of the book that I read for my master's. But it talked about like Native American slavery and the way that they would take slaves, but then eventually like adopt them. And so in the same way, like if you have these people that are these Europeans that were living somewhere else, and then they come over and they say, hey, can we be part of your tribe? Like the tribe's been decimated because of the exposure to disease from the Europeans. But it's like part of their cultural practice was to adopt people into the tribe. And so it is, to replace the people who've died. So it is very likely, plus if they're European and they have some European tools, good for you.
Right.
But it's, that's the kind of the most accepted historical thought, is that they were absorbed. Another one that seemed moderately plausible, that doesn't get into like demons and conspiracy and witches, which if we get into modern, I guess, horror or science fiction, pop culture, that's what we want to try and say was happening. It's supernatural, man. But the other possibility people said is that maybe they took everything down and tried to build a boat and sail back to England. Yeah. And they tried to sail across the ocean and didn't work.
Yeah.
Because there was a French colony that was set up like a decade or two earlier. I think it was like in 1563, I want to say. And like things didn't go well for them. They're like, this sucks. They got into problems with the natives. They're like, we're out of supplies. Screw this. Let's go home. And they literally built from like scrap a boat and sailed across the Atlantic. And so they're one of the theories that's it's not very accepted because where's the evidence? Right. And that's the problem with history, is that you need the evidence. And if you sink a wooden boat in the middle of the ocean, right, much like a tree falling in the middle of the forest, does anybody hear it?
Yeah.
Can anybody find it? And so, that's another thought, is that maybe they tried to sail back. They realized they're not coming back. Yeah. Boats east. And that they didn't make it across the ocean. So, I mean, I would like to think that they got absorbed by the natives. And that it was not a very, and it just eventually, like, you get tired of it. Like, that becomes your culture. And there's numerous examples of people who were on the frontier whose homes were attacked later on. And were adopted, slaves then adopted, and when they were found by their extended family and were tried to bring back into European society or American society, they were like hell bent to stay with the natives.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not saying that, it's just overwhelming. They were like, this is a better, like, they got used to that lifestyle. They'd assimilated into, the native way of life, which I think kind of flies in this counter narrative to what the Europeans would like to say. We're like, no, our society's better. Everybody wants to be like us. Yep. Where a lot of people that went and lived with the natives were like, nope, it's actually, this is preferable to what we're doing over there.
Exactly. So, yeah, so that's our little bit on Roanoke, Lost Colony, and to this day, unless something new really gets turned up, probably won't ever know the true answer until time machines are invented. So, but yeah, it's an interesting topic. Thank you for Bobby Harrington for letting us know. Appreciate it. Again, when this gets posted tomorrow, we will be taking more suggestions. So we are aware of a suggestion for World War II. We know that it's there, and we're still trying to figure out different topics specific to World War II, since the topic is so big and you guys don't want to watch a 20 million hour movie on us talking about it. So, Bark, anything else?
One of the other struggles that we have, even as we find physical evidence, is it evidence of the Lost Colony? Is it from the Lane Colony, which was kind of the fort building militaristic colony? So it's a matter of trying to, just because we find something old doesn't mean that it's from the Lost Colony of Roanoke. Yeah. Maybe some people went on a bender and, lost some stuff in the dirt.
Yep.
It doesn't make it Virginia Dare's, pacifier.
Yep.
So one of the biggest struggles that we have to realize in history is that there is a fair amount of stuff that we do not know and we cannot substantiate with evidence. And it's also interesting to know that the idea of the Lost Colony of Roanoke really doesn't become something that Americans really begin to become aware of until the mid to late 1800s, when somebody puts it in their history book.
Yep.
So.
Yep. So, all right. Awesome. Well, hope you enjoyed our video. Like and subscribe, obviously. Point down to different stuff. I think it's at the bottom of our video and stuff like that. Until next time, I'm the Turn.
I'm the Bark.
And we're going to be here a long time. Have a good night, everybody.
Be safe.
And be well.